I drove 4 hours through a snowstorm, expecting hugs and holiday lights, only to find the house empty, the locks changed, and a foreclosure notice nailed to the front door like a final goodbye. I remember exactly what the air smelled like that day. It was sharp and cold, the kind of December chill that makes your nose burn and your eyes water before you even step out of the car. I was 22, a senior in college, and I just finished my last final before winter break. My roommate, Marcus, had offered to let me stay at his place for the holidays, but I was homesick. I hadn't seen my parents since August, and even though they'd been quieter than usual, fewer texts, short phone calls, I told myself they were just busy. So I drove the 4 hours home, blasting Christmas music and sipping coffee I'd stopped for halfway, imagining the smile on my mom's face when I walked in. My dad's usual half grin. Maybe even a fire going, like we used to do before things got off. It was close to 8 p.m. when I pulled onto our street. The neighborhood was dark, the kind of suburb where most houses are asleep by 9, and I noticed something was wrong before I even parked. Our porch light was off. The driveway was empty. No wreath on the door, no lights in the windows. My chest tightened, but I chalked it up to bad timing. Maybe they went out. Maybe they were visiting someone. I grabbed my bag, keys in hand, and walked up the steps, already preparing to knock just in case. But the door didn't open. I turned the key again. It didn't fit. I looked down, confused, and tried it again. Same thing. That's when I noticed the bright orange paper stapled to the front door. At first, I thought it was just junk, a flyer or a holiday notice. But as I got closer, I saw the word in big, bold letters, foreclosure. I froze. I literally couldn't move. For a second, I wondered if I was dreaming. I checked the address again, checked my phone. This was my house. Or at least, it had been. I walked back to my car, sat in the front seat, and stared at the house like it would somehow explain itself. That's when I saw them, my boxes. My old duffel bag, some books, my high school trophies, my guitar case, all dumped in the snow at the edge of the driveway like trash. One box was soaked through, the cardboard caved in and sagging. My clothes were half buried in slush. It was like something out of a nightmare. I called my mom first. No answer. Then my dad. Straight to voicemail. Then my mom again. Then my younger cousin. Then the neighbor. Nothing. No one picked up. I sat there for a good 20 minutes in disbelief before I finally grabbed my things and crammed them into the back of my car. I had to toss some stuff out to make it all fit. My hands were frozen. My brain was still trying to catch up. I ended up booking a motel on the edge of town for the night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even really feel anything. Just empty. Numb. Like my soul had just shut down so I wouldn't combust. The next morning, I tried calling them again. Still no response. It wasn't until 3 days later that my dad finally picked up. I didn't yell. I didn't ask him what was going on. I just said, "Why?" He sighed, like I was being difficult. "We thought you'd figure it out." Figure what out? That we had to move on. The house was underwater. We weren't going to sit around waiting for you to come back. You didn't even tell me. He said, "You're old enough to figure things out on your own. We assumed you'd manage." That was the last thing he said to me before I hung up and blocked his number. Blocked my mom's too. Then every family member who tried to make excuses or brush it off. My aunt texted. I'm sure they had their reasons. My uncle said, "Your dad's been under a lot of stress." No one asked how I was doing. No one offered a couch or a warm meal or even just someone to talk to. I went back to school early and crashed at Marcus's place for the rest of the break. I told him everything eventually, and he didn't say much, just handed me a blanket and ordered pizza. That gesture meant more than any word from my family ever had. Spring semester started, and I threw myself into work. Classes, jobs, side gigs, anything to stay busy. I picked up extra shifts at the campus cafe, started tutoring underclassmen, even sold some of my old music equipment online just to keep afloat. I applied for every scholarship, every emergency grant I could find. No loans. I'd sworn to myself I'd make it on my own now. I was done depending on people who treated me like an afterthought. I graduated the following winter. A semester early. No pomp, no ceremony. Just me and a few friends, watching the virtual announcement in our tiny apartment, passing around a pizza and a bottle of cheap champagne. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I didn't expect anyone to care. Which is why, when I stepped out into the sunlight after picking up my diploma packet from campus, I nearly dropped it when I saw my parents standing there. My mom was smiling like we just bumped into each other at the grocery store. My dad had his hands in his coat pockets, doing that awkward shuffle he always did when he didn't know how to act. My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned around to walk away, but my mom called after me like nothing had happened. "Sweetie, aren't you going to say hi?" I kept walking. She followed. "We're so proud of you," she said. We didn't miss the announcement. We were watching. I baked cupcakes. I stopped, not because I wanted to talk, but because something inside me finally snapped. I turned around slowly, looked her in the eyes. I said, "You baked cupcakes?" She nodded eagerly, like she expected me to smile, to fall into her arms, to pretend the last 13 months never happened. "You think cupcakes make up for dumping my life in the snow?" Her smile faltered, just for a second. My dad shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say a word. "Typical. You ghosted me," I said. "Didn't even have the decency to call. Just vanished. You let me drive 4 hours home to find a foreclosure notice and my stuff in the gutter like I was some stranger who got evicted." My mom's voice took on that sickly sweet, performative tone I knew too well. "We were going through so much, honey. We didn't want to burden you. We thought you'd understand." I took a step forward. "Understand what? That you didn't care enough to send a single text? That I didn't even deserve a goodbye?" "You're being dramatic," she said, her voice tightening. "Am I?" I said. "Because the only drama I remember is me sleeping in a motel that night, digging through snow for my soaked clothes." My mom opened her mouth like she had something to say, but nothing came out. My dad finally cleared his throat. "We were hoping to talk," he said. "Privately. Maybe grab lunch. Celebrate your achievement." I laughed. It came out bitter. "Celebrate? You didn't lift a finger to help me finish school. I worked 2 jobs, sold half my stuff, survived off ramen and $1 coffee refills to make it here. I earned this. You don't get to show up at the finish line and pretend you were part of the race." People were starting to stare. I saw a girl in a cap and gown elbow her boyfriend, whispering and pointing toward us. My mom seemed to notice too, because her voice dropped to a hiss. "Can we not do this here? You came here," I said. "You decided this was the place. So don't get shy now." Her face twisted like she was chewing something sour. "I just want our family back together." "No," I said. "You want to look like a family again. But you left that behind when you locked me out of your life and didn't bother looking back." A beat of silence. Then my dad said the quiet part out loud. "Look, your mother's been talking to some people, alumni networks, donors. There are opportunities opening up now that you're graduating. Connections. It would help if we could present a united front. Just for appearances." I stared at him, stunned. "So that's what this is," I whispered. "You don't care about me. You care about how I make you look. You think now that I've made something of myself, you can cash in." They didn't deny it. They didn't even try. That was the moment something inside me settled. All the confusion, the hurt, the second-guessing I'd done over the past year. It all crystallized into something cold and certain. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the laminated card the dean had handed me with my diploma packet, and held it up. "You see this? I earned this without you. Every lecture, every exam, every dollar I scraped together, I did it alone. So take your cupcakes, your photo op smiles, and your fake apologies and walk away. Because you don't get to be part of this story." I turned my back and walked. I didn't look to see if they followed. I didn't care if they cried, or called out, or stood there like statues while the wind blew through their coats. All I cared about was that, for the first time in my life, I had nothing tying me to them. No debt, no expectations, no shame, just freedom. And as I turned the corner and saw Marcus waving from his car with the "Congrats, grad" sign still taped to the window, I smiled. Really smiled, for the first time in a long time. That should have been the end. But they weren't done yet. Because the very next week, I got a message request on LinkedIn from someone I hadn't seen in over 5 years, my Uncle Dave. He wrote, "Hey bud, your dad mentioned you might be hiring. Thought we could catch up." And that's when I knew I wasn't just their son anymore. I was an opportunity. I stared at the message for a good 5 minutes, rereading it over and over, trying to process the sheer audacity. "Hey bud." Bud. As if we were old pals. As if he hadn't ignored every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation. Uncle Dave was my dad's older brother, and growing up, he was the kind of relative who showed up only when there was food or photos being taken. Never once asked how I was doing. Never offered to help with school or anything else, even when things at home got tense. And now, out of nowhere, here he was, talking like we'd been tight for years. I didn't reply. Not at first. I called Marcus. "You're not going to believe this," I said, and read him the message. There was a pause. Then, "Please tell me you're going to mess with him." "Oh, I'm thinking about it," I said. "I just haven't decided how far I want to go." Because the truth was, Uncle Dave wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, more messages started trickling in. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My mom's church friend who once told me I was too sensitive when I cried during a sermon. Even my dad's former coworker, who I only met once at a barbecue and who barely remembered my name. They were all just checking in. All so proud of me. All hoping to reconnect. And I realized this wasn't random. This was orchestrated. My parents had bragged. At some party or family dinner, they must have played the doting parent card and painted themselves as the backbone of my success. And now that people saw me as a rising star new grad, already interviewing with 2 Fortune 500s, freelance projects blowing up, they all wanted a piece. The funny part? Not one of them asked how I did it. They didn't know I'd spent nights sleeping in the school library because I couldn't afford both rent and tuition. That I'd stood in grocery store aisles doing math in my head to see if I could afford ramen and toothpaste. That I'd been this close to dropping out 3 different times and only stayed because of Marcus and a stubborn voice in my head that said, "Don't give them the satisfaction." They didn't know that after my parents cut me off, it wasn't rage that got me through, it was clarity. I finally saw them for who they were. Not villains. Not monsters. Just selfish people who didn't want to be inconvenienced by their own child's existence. So yeah, I decided I would mess with them. Just a little. I replied to Uncle Dave. "Hey, great to hear from you. I've actually been considering hiring someone for a new project. Can you send over your resume and a short cover letter explaining your recent work?" He replied within 10 minutes. "Sure thing. I'll send that right over. Excited to work with you." But the resume came 2 days later. It was bad. Like, still using AOL email and listing Microsoft Word under skills bad. He had a 5-year employment gap and didn't explain it. And when I Googled the one company he had worked for, it had shut down in 2019 after a lawsuit. Still, I kept it professional. "Thanks, Dave," I replied. "We'll be in touch if you're a fit for the role." Then I posted a vague update on LinkedIn. Grateful for everyone who supported me on this journey. Just a reminder, success isn't built overnight, and it's never owed to those who disappeared during the struggle. The next day, my mom texted me from a new number. The message was long, rambling. She talked about how family is complicated, how they made mistakes, how they did what they thought was best at the time. But the kicker was the last line. "We're just glad to see you thriving. That means we raised you right." I almost threw my phone. "No," I thought. "You didn't raise me at all. You abandoned me." And I made myself. But I didn't respond. I was done giving them explanations. I started preparing to move, job offer pending, out of state. I didn't post about it. Didn't share where. I just started packing, selling what I didn't need, and focusing on my next chapter. But just when I thought things had finally calmed down, an invitation showed up in the mail. Cream-colored envelope. My parents' return address. Inside, a card. "Join us for a family celebration honoring our son's graduation." With my full name in bold letters. They were throwing a party. In my honor. Without asking me. And I wasn't invited. I stared at the invitation stunned. A party? In my honor? After everything? My hands actually shook as I held the card, trying to understand what kind of mental gymnastics it took to decide this was okay. They weren't just twisting the truth, they were rewriting it. Acting like they'd been there for me, like they deserved to celebrate what I had achieved entirely on my own. And to make it worse, they didn't even have the decency to invite me. My name was on the card like I was the guest of honor, but it was clear I wasn't supposed to attend. I was supposed to be a story they told, a symbol of their successful parenting. I wasn't a son anymore. I was a trophy. I could have ignored it, tossed the invitation in the trash, and moved on. But something about the smugness of it, the arrogance, made me mad. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the truth, and how they buried it under cupcakes and fake smiles and a house full of lies. So I made a decision. I RSVP'd. I bought a new suit, nothing flashy, just sharp and confident. I printed out a few things and slipped them into a folder. And on the day of the party, I showed up. It was held in a rented event space in the city. Not fancy, but enough to make a statement. When I walked in, heads turned. My mom froze mid-laugh, holding a glass of sparkling cider. My dad's jaw actually dropped. People started clapping, distant relatives, Old neighbors, coworkers I'd never met, all of them smiling like they knew me. Like they deserved to know me. I walked right up to the front of the room, where a banner read, "Congratulations, Ethan," in big gold letters. My mom took a shaky step forward, voice high and sweet. "Ethan, honey, we weren't sure you'd be able to make it. But save it," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. The chatter stopped immediately. You could have heard a pin drop. I pulled out the folder and handed copies to the nearest guests, printed emails, financial aid records, dated photos of my belongings dumped outside our old house. I watched their faces shift from confusion to discomfort to outright disbelief. Then I spoke. I didn't graduate because of this family. I graduated in spite of them. Murmurs spread through the crowd. These people, my parents, changed the locks on me. They let the house get foreclosed and dumped my stuff in the snow without so much as a phone call. They ghosted me for over a year. Didn't help. Didn't check in. Didn't care if I was sleeping on a bench or eating once a day. And now they're throwing a party like they were part of the journey. My voice was calm, measured, but I made sure every word hit like a hammer. This celebration isn't for me. It's for them. So they can tell themselves a story where they were good parents, where they stood by me. But that's not the truth. And I won't let them keep lying to you or to themselves. My mom's face turned pale. My dad looked like he was about to say something, but no words came out. I turned to the guests. If you're here because you genuinely supported me, thank you. But if you're here because they told you they raised me into something successful, I'm sorry. They didn't. I did. I walked out to stunned silence. No applause. No protests. Just the sound of one life collapsing under the weight of the truth. A week later, a few of the guests reached out. Some apologized. Some said they had no idea. A few even offered professional contacts or help. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. I just wanted them to know. I wanted the story to finally be mine. And as for my parents, they tried calling, messaging, even sending a handwritten letter saying they were hurt and disappointed that I would air private family matters in public. I didn't respond. Because the truth is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm done. I moved to a new city a month later. Started a job I love. Got an apartment with a view of the skyline and a bookshelf full of secondhand novels and notebooks where I scribbled down ideas for the memoir I'll write someday. And every now and then, when I sip coffee on my tiny balcony, I remember that night in the snow. The silence. The cold. And I smile. Because I made it. Not because of them. But because I decided I would.